All right, I can't see the camera, so I hope I'm focused in the right location. This is my initial test. Check the temperature. So the temperature of the soil is like 33 degrees. And temperature of this piece of primitive pottery is now about 30 degrees. So it's still got some moisture in it. It's pretty hard. I did form it against this bucket so that I could get an idea of how clean that is. When I broke it off, you can see some edges chipped off. But it packed tight. I mean, it's like a piece of concrete. And that was just some of the sand and water. And so now I'm just going to kind of do a scratch test. You can see it flakes away. I mean, it's not concrete, but it's really compressively hard. So I don't know yet whether adding some straw or grass or something to it is going to help. You know, all this desert grass is pretty tough. Something like this, a lot of tensile strength. So I'd imagine I can mix that. So right now I'm going to do some tests and see if I can make some good mud cakes. Starting with some of these old bottles. Hopefully this knife that I got is not sharp enough. I don't want this to be a YouTube video about how to cut a plastic bottle. But it's got some interesting forms in there. It'll allow me to monitor the shrinkage. I'm also going to add some concrete to one of them, maybe some straw or grass, as I mentioned, to some of it. And I'm going to work with some soil that's below the surface here a little bit. It's not filled with all kinds of loose crap and stones and stuff. And I have a window screen that I'm also going to use to kind of filter out some of this extra junk that would probably make this break apart. See, I can still snap it in two, and it's moist on the inside, so I probably shouldn't have done that yet. The other thought is to try to put that in some sort of fire, like a kiln, and see if I can get some greater hardness out of it. All right, down to mud pies. See how dusty this stuff is. I think pounding it with a pestle and mortar might be something that would refine it even more. Make it even more dusty. But this stuff is what I think will turn into the kind of, I guess, the Adobe Clay. So that's bucket number 2. My first bucket was from 1 foot down in a test pit I did. The third bucket will be the initial topsoil, and you can actually see the difference in the color of the soil, which I'll show you in a second. Hopefully you can see the color difference of the soil. This one here was the 1 foot down, which I've filtered into this. It's kind of a certain tan color. The stuff that didn't filter is this kind of rocky stuff that seems more, I don't know, limestone based, I'm not sure. And this was the surface. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's a stark difference in color between the two. Alright, this soil was from an excavation quite some time ago, and you can see a slight difference in color between the two of those. My suspicion is the browner soil is the more clay-like stuff. Before I get really messy, so what I've got a sack of concrete, and I'm just going to roughly get some of the Portland cement out of there. It looks like there's a lot of sand, but I'll add it to the mix anyways. I've got labeled here my 12-inch hole is A, kind of a light brown. Medium brown is the surface of the same hole. So that was in the top 6 inches or so. And this is the old mound found on the property. It looks to be a slightly darker brown. Could be the light, and I'm labeling that one C. So a little lab here experiment is I'm going to fill these up with water to the right consistency. I'm going to have A, B, C, D, which is the car dust. That is the finest, and it's about a medium brown. And then I'm going to add some grass to one of them. The one that seems to pack the best, I'll add grass to. And with concrete to the next one there, I'll try to just get the finer concrete. Alright, so I'm about to get messy, so I'll put this on a tripod. Hopefully it won't get too long. Well, the clay part is definitely coming out, but the initial mixture felt like it was more sandy. So, not sure. I definitely made it too wet. I almost need no. I want this to kind of be a mud cake kind of quality. And I wish there was a better way of packing this. But now I've got it down and all caught in all the crevices here. So my fingernails are going to be packed with it. Probably should have mixed it in the container, but I didn't really want to muddy up these containers. I can feel the viscosity. Try to pull it out there. You can hear that sound. So that's a good sign. I think I have to find a better method of stirring. The finger's always handy, but it's not the best system. Wow. Give you an idea, because I'll probably cut this video short. There it is. Wow. Indian war paint. Alright, so you add more sand to that. You need to find a good stick. Everything you need is just within reach. So I'm gonna add some more to that. This is bucket number A. Maybe too much water. Remember, it's like easy to add way too much. Stirring is really important. That's why I actually should be stirring this. Probably in another larger container. Cut a couple these up. So I don't bore you before my fingers get too dirty. I'm gonna turn off the video and cut to the end. All right, here it is, near the end of the day. Feel my stomach growling, and this is the results. Well, not the results, but the in progress of my mud pie experiment. Here we have it. Sandy, as described before, and I ended up packing. I think it'll be a bit better. I packed it with straw. Did the same for B with straw. C, which was the dirt from the previous old pile, and with straw, seemed to make a big difference as far as a binder goes. My car dust, which I overwatered, but I'll let that dry out until a medallion, which I imagine will break easily. This is concrete dust that I screened out, and this is about 1/4 concrete dust with I think it was with B here, which I don't think will make much of a difference. And then I did pack the same with straw as well. And this is concrete and the aggregate right from the bag. So I packed that down. I didn't overwater it, and we'll see how strong that gets with the aggregate. It is in a smaller quantity, so we'll have to see. Yeah, I think that's it. So stay tuned. When I get back here, we'll see how hard everything is, how well it pulls together, how well it pulls together. Here's my experiment. First thing to note, yeah, I should have left these in the shade. They dried out too fast. Anything that was against the plastic has released itself, but mostly you can see some cracking, and that's because it dried out too fast. It's about 18 hours since I did this. This was mud number 8A. That's 12-inch deep hole. There's a little bit of cracking, but there's straw in this, and first thing to note is that made the biggest difference. So I can't break that at all easily. Barely scratches with a knife. I can chip away at it. It's not as hard as concrete, but you can see that I'm barely leaving a mark with the knife. So I'll just test overall. This one was from the dirt that was at the top. It's actually a little bit more granular on this one. Trying to break it in half now. Can't. So having the consistent soil, I would imagine a little bit lower down made a difference. Could be how I packed it, how wet it was. I believe that really squeezing or tamping the clay makes a big difference. Third one here was also scratches like the second one. That was number C, and that was the darkest ground. That came from a pile. It's not nearly as hard as the first one. So my overall conclusion is that digging down to a consistency below the dirt, probably a lot less impurities, resulted in a harder thing. This is the one that I mixed with concrete. It is just as porous and no harder, I believe. I have to put it under compression test, but hey, I'll stand on it. You can see these are not breaking. Yeah, so good test there. So mud by itself seems fine thus far. Let's see where these plastic bottles, I'll pry them away. This knife is not the sharpest. These are still moist, and that's because they're just drying out from the top. So that would not be the right way to form these. Using something wood or porous on the edges to remove excess moisture is probably the way to go. I would believe that forming them to maybe a half day or a day consistency in a larger block and then releasing the forms would be the hardest thing, because you can see this is dried out but contained in plastic. It's still moist at the bottom, and there is still some moisture on this one at the top. This one is a little harder at the top. Moist at the bottom, pretty hard. Scratch is nothing like the brick that I left out here. Pretty porous. So don't even need to dig into this one. Not as good. So that dirt pile I found that looked clay-like was not as hard. This cracked. This was the soupy mixture of dust from the car. It did crack because I had way too much water in there. It is dried out. The piece in itself is probably in kind to a piece of pottery that hasn't been kiln dried. So it'd be interesting. I might try to create a fire and see if I can harden that any more under heat. Glazing it or something would create a finish. So these pieces, these little medallions here, yeah, that hard to collect that fine of dust, but hey, you could use this as pottery. Concrete. This is the concrete that was just right out of the bag. I can see this was obviously a Dairy Queen container, and there's a really good hard imprint of DQ on there. That is very hard. So the aggregate mixture there has actually created a much stronger. So we know that conventional concrete is much stronger than what we get with the clay. But hey, that would be importing a whole lot of clay or a whole lot of concrete into the site, which is not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work with what we have here on site as much as possible. This, as far as heat retention and everything else, it's cool to the touch. The ground is at 32 degrees. Well, it's about the same. I think where there's more moisture, or the darker color, this is actually a little bit, it's about 35, 36, 33, 32. And I think that's just because of the darker color. Concrete, which I think was mostly in the shade, is at 29. So this last part here, this was a mix. I think I saw it of the concrete and the the dirt, the native dirt that I screened. And let's see. See, that's a cracking. Pretty good. It's still moist on the bottom, so it's not as hard. Do a little closer scratch test. You can see the ridges there of the bottle. Quite soft there. Harder on top, but still not that hard. This would probably break apart under compressive stress. So overall, the conclusions are, although I could have done a better test and I could have dried them out slower, and when I do a larger sample size for like a brick or something, I'll be more careful to not let them dry out too quick, have the right consistency. Concrete would be a suitable foundation for the mud brick, and I think it's code required anyways if you use it. I'm not going to use the mud brick as a structural element, but as a enclosure and heat retention element that will be kind of a heat sink for the building. The biggest problem here is managing the day and night temperatures, which swing throughout the year approximately 20 degrees, summer and winter. So being able to manage that lag is what the building needs, not to operate off of conventional air conditioning and that sort of thing. So yeah, the biggest conclusion is that mixing with the grass or the straw and sampling the dirt under the surface where there's less impurities is what I need. Show you up close. I mean, that is really hard. So let me try to hammer that with a rock and see if it actually breaks. Rock number 1, rock number 2. I'm giving it quite a pound. It's breaking off the surface. It is starting to crack it. It's probably a little bit more moist still inside. It hasn't had 24 hours yet. But the grass, which I've exposed, is a terrific binder. So that's definitely how I'm going to create some bricks. I'm just starting to pry it apart. And again, I bet you that's because it's moist on the inside. The grass is really hard to pull apart. grunting. It's a scientific test there. So, yeah, a little bit moisture on the inside. Damn, so that's not going to come apart too easily. And I imagine the straw also, which probably have too much in there. It is sucking up the moisture, so there's not too much moisture in the clay, reducing the cracks on the outside. It's now falling apart, but I mean, this is trying to rip, I don't know, a piece of fiberglass or something. It's not easy. Okay, it crumbled before the grass broke, and you see I've got way too much grass in there. There, I think that's a successful experiment. So that'll be a later deal when I have a pile of earth from digging. I'll try to get them to separate the top from the stuff that's below the surface, mount it in the pile, and when I get around to it, I'll be able to create some earth bricks. So that's using what's on site, not hauling the earth off of site, and then going ahead with that kind of waste that we have on building projects, where we're just importing a whole bunch of stuff, creating a whole bunch of waste, and we're throwing things away. So using what's on site here, finding salvage materials, things that would otherwise be going in a planned and signed dump site somewhere at a mine that we won't see, but as obviously as we buy more and more products, affecting the here. So it's being able to use that recycled materials in an intelligent way is kind of what I'm after. So that just about concludes that. Thank you very much.